My daughter, Jessica, sat across from me at my own kitchen table, her brow furrowed with that practiced look of loving concern she'd perfected over the years. She slid a stack of brochures across the polished oak, brochures for luxury retirement communities, the kind with taglines like, "The Golden Years in Good Hands." My husband had been gone for 6 months, and she was already trying to put me out to pasture. She lectured me about financial prudence, about protecting my assets, about how a woman my age, alone, is a target. What she didn't know, as she patted my hand and told me she would take care of everything, is that the charming, silver-haired gentleman she was so vehemently against me dating wasn't my new boyfriend at all. He was the forensic accountant I'd hired to prove that she and my late husband had been systematically draining my inheritance for the last 15 years. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. Let me start from the beginning. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago, all at once. When my husband, Robert, passed away after a sudden heart attack, my world just stopped. He wasn't just my husband of 42 years, he was the bedrock of my life. He handled the big things, the finances, the investments, all the complicated paperwork that made my eyes glaze over. I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was Robert. Steady, dependable, my rock. Our daughter, Jessica, stepped in immediately. She's my only child, a force of nature, always has been. She's a successful real estate agent, dresses in power suits, and carries a briefcase that probably cost more than my first car. In the haze of grief, I was grateful. She organized the funeral, handled the probate lawyer, and brought over casseroles she'd ordered from some gourmet shop. "Don't you worry about a thing, Mom," she'd say, her voice firm but gentle. "I've got it all under control." And I believed her. For the first few months, I was just a ghost in my own house, wandering through rooms filled with memories. But as the fog began to lift, I started noticing things. Little things at first. A bill for a storage unit I didn't know we had. A credit card statement with charges from a high-end men's store in a city Robert hadn't visited in years. When I asked Jessica about them, she'd wave her hand dismissively. "Oh, that's just Dad's old stuff. Probably some business expense he forgot to file. I'll handle it." The first real crack in the foundation appeared about 3 months in. I was looking for my mother's pearl necklace to wear to a friend's daughter's wedding. I keep my good jewelry in a safe deposit box at the local bank. When I went to get it, the bank manager, a kind man named Mr. Henderson, who's known me for ages, informed me that the box had been cleared out 2 weeks prior. He showed me the log. There was Jessica's signature, clear as day. Robert had added her to the account years ago, just in case of emergency, he'd said. Apparently, me needing to wear family heirlooms didn't qualify, but this was a 5-alarm fire. When I confronted her, she didn't even blink. "Mom, honestly, you're so upset. I moved everything to a more secure vault at my bank in the city. You can't be too careful. I was going to tell you." She said it with such confidence, such smooth assurance that I almost believed her. She made me feel foolish, like a doddering old woman who couldn't keep track of her own valuables. But in the pit of my stomach, a cold knot of dread was starting to form. Why wouldn't she have told me? Why the secrecy? That's when I started to really look. At night, when the house was quiet, I went into Robert's office, a room I'd barely entered when he was alive. It was his sanctuary. I started opening drawers, sifting through files. It was mostly gibberish to me, stock portfolios, tax returns going back decades. But then I found a folder tucked away in the very back of his bottom desk drawer, behind a stack of old user manuals for computers we no longer owned. It was labeled simply J. Inside weren't stock certificates or legal documents. They were statements for a brokerage account I'd never heard of. And the transfers, my God, the transfers. Thousands of dollars moved every month like clockwork for the last 15 years from our main joint account into this one. And from that account, money was flowing out to accounts I didn't recognize, paying for things I couldn't fathom. A mortgage on a condo in Aspen, lease payments on a car I'd never seen, and regular, large payments directly into an account under one name, Jessica Martin, my daughter.
My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the papers. It was like the floor had just dropped out from under me. Robert, my Robert, and Jessica, my own little girl. The betrayal was a physical thing. It felt like a punch to the gut, winding me, leaving me breathless and dizzy. For 42 years, I had built a life with a man who, it seemed, was living another one entirely behind my back. And my daughter was his accomplice. I knew right then and there that I couldn't handle this alone. Jessica was too smart, too slick. She'd twist it all around, make me out to be a confused, grieving widow who was imagining things. She was already priming the pump, telling her friends and our family how worried she was about me, how I was not myself since her father passed. I needed someone who could see through the lies, someone who spoke the language of numbers and deceit. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. Finding Arthur wasn't easy. I didn't just look up forensic accountant in the yellow pages. Do they even make those anymore? No, I was smarter than that. My best friend Eleanor has a nephew who is a tax attorney, a real shark. I took Eleanor to lunch, swore her to secrecy, and laid out a very watered-down version of my fears. I told her I thought Robert had made some bad investments and I needed someone to discreetly untangle the mess without it becoming a big family drama. He listened, nodded, and gave me a name on a slip of paper. Arthur Finch, he said. He's retired, but he takes on special cases. He's the best there is at finding things people don't want found. He's also as discreet as a priest in a confessional. Our first meeting was in a quiet corner of a dusty old library, miles from my neighborhood. Arthur was not what I expected. I was picturing a stuffy old man in a tweed jacket. Instead, he looked like a retired college professor. Soft-spoken, kind eyes, a gentle smile. He wore a comfortable-looking sweater and carried a worn leather briefcase. He listened to my whole story without interrupting once, his gaze never leaving mine. When I finished, my voice trembling as I handed him the J folder, he simply closed it, patted my hand, and said, "Carol, let's find out what the truth is." That's when we came up with the plan. Jessica was watching my every move. She'd installed a new security system on the house that she could monitor from her phone. She called me 3 times a day. She'd pop by unannounced. If I suddenly had a strange man visiting my house, poring over documents, she would know in a heartbeat. The only way for me to have regular, private meetings with Arthur was if he was hiding in plain sight. "We need a cover story," Arthur said during our second meeting at a noisy coffee shop. Something she would find plausible, but also irritating. Something that would make her focus on the man, not on what the man is doing. And that's when it hit me. "My new boyfriend," I said. Arthur raised an eyebrow. "A boyfriend?" "Oh, it's perfect," I explained, the idea taking shape. "Jessica is terrified of me remarrying, not because she cares about my happiness, but because a new husband could complicate her access to the estate she thinks is all hers." I told her how she'd been harping on me to not do anything foolish. "If I start dating someone," she continued, "she'll be so busy trying to discredit you, prove you're a gold-digging scammer, that she won't even think to look at what we're actually doing, which is gathering the evidence to prove that she's the scammer." A slow smile spread across Arthur's face. "That," he said with a chuckle, "is wonderfully devious. I accept the role." And so Arthur, the new boyfriend, was born. We started slowly. I mentioned to Jessica on the phone that I'd joined a book club at the library to get out of the house. A week later, I told her I'd met a very nice gentleman there, a widower named Arthur. The explosion was immediate and just as predictable as I'd hoped. Mom, what are you thinking? It's too soon. You don't know this man. He's probably after your money. You're vulnerable right now. I played the part of the slightly naive, slightly lonely widow perfectly. Oh, Jessica, don't be silly. He's just a friend. It's nice to have someone to talk to. Our first date was a public affair. We went to a popular local restaurant for lunch, one where I knew at least 3 of my neighbors and their gossip-loving wives would be. I wore a bright pink sweater. We held hands across the table. Arthur was a natural. He was attentive, he made me laugh, and he looked at me with an expression of gentle adoration that was so convincing, I almost believed it myself. By the time we'd finished our coffee, I knew the news would be all over town by dinner time, and straight to Jessica's ears.
It worked like a charm. She was at my house within the hour, her face a mask of thunder. And that's when she came with the brochures for the retirement homes. She was trying to box me in, to paint me as an unstable old woman making reckless decisions who needed to be put somewhere she could be monitored for her own good. That was her play. Control the narrative, declare me incompetent, and get power of attorney before my new boyfriend could get his imaginary hands on a single dime. She had no idea that while she was busy plotting how to ship me off, that same boyfriend was in my den, connecting to my desktop remotely and downloading 40 years of financial records that were about to bring her whole world crashing down. I looked at the glossy brochures spread across my table, each showing smiling, silver-haired seniors playing shuffleboard or painting watercolors. The message was clear. This is where you belong. Out of the way. I took a slow sip of my tea, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment before I met Jessica's gaze. I gave her the most benign, slightly confused smile I could muster. "Oh, honey, these are lovely," I said, picking one up, "but I'm not quite ready for bingo and early bird specials. Besides, Arthur and I are thinking of taking a trip, maybe to the coast. He tells me the sea air does wonders." It was like throwing a lit match into a bucket of gasoline. Her face, which she usually keeps under such tight control, flickered with rage. "A trip? You've known this man for 5 minutes and you're talking about a trip? Mom, you have to hear yourself. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Men like this, they prey on women like you. Lonely, wealthy widows. He's a parasite." "My goodness, Jessica, that's a terrible thing to say," I chided gently, my heart beating a steady, triumphant rhythm in my chest. Hook, line, and sinker. Arthur is a perfect gentleman. He's retired, financially secure. He was a professor, for heaven's sake. We'd crafted Arthur's backstory meticulously. A retired history professor from a small college in upstate New York. It was boring, respectable, and nearly impossible to disprove without significant effort. "She's going to run a background check on him," she announced, crossing her arms. "I'm not letting some con artist get his claws into Dad's money. Our money." There it was. A slip of the tongue, but it told me everything. Our money. Not my money, not the family estate. Our money. As if she already had one hand on the deed to my life. "You do whatever you feel you need to do, dear," I said, patting her hand. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get ready. Arthur is taking me to the garden center. We're going to pick out some new rose bushes." She left in a huff, her tires screeching just a little as she pulled out of the driveway. The moment her car was out of sight, Arthur emerged from the den with a small thumb drive in his hand. "All copied," he said, his expression grim. "Carol, it's worse than you thought. It wasn't just a simple siphoning. Robert and Jessica set up at least 2 shell corporations. It looks like they were funneling money from your investment portfolio through these fake companies, claiming them as business losses on their taxes, and then paying it out to themselves on the other side. This is major league fraud." I felt a wave of nausea, but I pushed it down.
This wasn't the time to crumble. This was the time to get angry. Can you prove it? Give me a little more time, he said, his voice reassuring. The digital trail is there. They were arrogant. They thought no one would ever look, especially not you. He gave me a sad smile. I'm sorry, Carol. This must be devastating. You know, Arthur, I walked over to the window and looked at the empty spot where Jessica's car had been. The real devastation happened the day I found that folder. Everything since then, this is just business. Our dates became our strategy sessions. We were a sight, I'm sure. Two people in their late 60s leaning close together over a pot of geraniums at the local nursery, murmuring about offshore accounts and wire transfers. We'd go to the movies, matinees, of course, and in the darkness, he'd pass me notes with updates like we were spies in some old Cold War film. Jessica's private investigator, a scruffy-looking man who was terrible at his job, would be sitting 3 rows behind us, snoring softly into his popcorn. Jessica's desperation was growing, and it was making her sloppy. She started calling Arthur's old and entirely fictitious university department, asking questions about his employment history. We had a friend of Arthur's, another retired accountant with a flair for the dramatic, field the calls. He'd spin a lovely tale of Professor Finch, a beloved academic who retired with a full pension after 30 years of dedicated service.
And just when she thought she had him backed into a corner, she forgot who she was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. The real breakthrough came from a place I never expected. While dusting Robert's old office, a place I now called the scene of the crime, I knocked over a heavy crystal paperweight on his bookshelf. It fell behind the massive oak bookcase. I sighed, knowing I'd have to move the whole heavy thing to get it back. I pulled and grunted, and as the bookcase slid a few inches away from the wall, I saw it. A small, almost invisible safe set into the wall, hidden behind a false panel. My blood ran cold. I had lived in this house for 40 years. I had no idea that safe existed. It took Arthur 3 days to get it open. He had a contact, someone from his old life, he said, who could crack anything without a fuss. When the heavy door finally swung open, we both just stared. It wasn't full of cash or jewelry. It was full of documents and a ledger, a small black leather-bound ledger. In it, in Robert's neat, precise handwriting, was a detailed record of every single transaction, every dollar moved, every shell corporation created, every false loss claimed. And next to many of the entries were Jessica's initials, followed by notes. J confirmed Aspenwire. J handled the paperwork for Triton Holdings. J's commission paid. It wasn't just a record, it was a confession. He had been meticulously documenting their crimes for 15 years. Why? I whispered, sinking into the office chair. Why would he keep a record of it? It's insane. Arthur looked at the ledger, his expression a mixture of awe and pity. Leverage, he said softly. He was holding it over her, Carol. This was his insurance policy. If Jessica ever got out of line, ever threatened to expose him, or tried to take more than her allotted share, he had this. He could have destroyed her with it. The cruelty of it stole my breath. This was the man I had loved. This was the father my daughter had adored. A partnership built not on love or family, but on greed and mutual blackmail. They were 2 snakes in a pit, and I had been sleeping peacefully above them the entire time. That evening, Jessica called. Her voice was syrupy sweet, a tone that always meant trouble. Mom, I have wonderful news. I've scheduled a meeting for us with a new financial advisor, a friend of mine. His name is Mr. Davidson. He's going to help you get everything consolidated and set you up with a trust. It will make everything so much simpler for you. I could see the whole plan laid out. Her friend would get me to sign papers, probably granting Jessica durable power of attorney over my finances.
She would declare me incompetent to manage my own affairs, using my reckless relationship with a stranger as Exhibit A. Once she had legal control, Arthur would be locked out. I'd be shipped off to one of those brochure-ready facilities, and she and the ghost of my husband would have won. I smiled into the phone. "Why, Jessica, that sounds lovely," I said. "When is the meeting?" "Friday, 10 a.m., at his office," she said, the triumph barely concealed in her voice. "I'll pick you up at 9. "Perfect," I said. "But, I think it's only right that Arthur should come too. He's been so helpful, and I'd value his opinion." There was a choked silence on the other end of the line. She hadn't counted on that. She was furious. I could feel it radiating through the phone. But she couldn't object without showing her hand. Forcing a man she was calling a gold digger to attend a financial meeting would look suspicious to her advisor. "Fine," she finally spat out. "Bring your friend." "Oh, I will," I said, my voice as sweet as honey. "We wouldn't miss it for the world." After I hung up, I turned to Arthur. He had the black ledger in his hands. "She just set the stage for her own downfall," I said. Arthur smiled. "Then I suppose it's time we set the table." The 3 days leading up to that Friday meeting were the calm before the storm. But let me tell you, on our side, it was a beehive of activity. Arthur, God bless him, was in his element. He treated the Black Ledger like it was the Holy Grail. The first thing we did was take it to a specialty copy shop, the kind that lawyers and architects use. We made high-resolution, certified copies of every single page. The original was then taken to a new safe deposit box at a different bank, one that was in my name and my name alone. Jessica's name was nowhere near it. Then came the lawyer. Arthur knew exactly who to call. Her name was Helen Vance, and she was a semi-retired prosecutor who now did private consulting. When she walked into my living room, she was like a force of nature. About my age, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, with sharp, intelligent eyes that didn't miss a thing. She didn't offer sympathy, she offered strategy. I liked her immediately. We sat around my dining room table, which was now covered in spreadsheets and copies of the ledger pages. The three of us, the widow, the accountant, and the prosecutor. It felt like the start of a crime novel. Helen listened to the entire story, her face unreadable. When I finished, she picked up a copy of one of the ledger pages. "They were incredibly bold," she said, her voice crisp. "The arrogance of documenting it all. Robert must have thought he was untouchable, and he clearly didn't trust his daughter an inch." "So, what's the plan?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Do we just walk into this meeting and throw the book at her?" Helen smiled, a thin, dangerous smile. "Oh no, Carol, that's not nearly theatrical enough. A cornered animal will lash out. We want to build a cage around her so perfectly that by the time she realizes she's trapped, the door is already locked." The plan she laid out was brilliant. Simple, elegant, and utterly devastating. Stage 1 was the meeting with Jessica and her pet advisor, Mr. Davidson. My role was to play the part I'd been playing for months, a slightly confused but sweet widow who was trying her best. Arthur's role was to be the quiet, supportive boyfriend. Helen would not be there. Stage 2 would come later. On Friday morning, I took my time getting ready. I chose a charcoal gray pantsuit that I hadn't worn in years. It was my boardroom suit from back when I used to do some consulting work myself, long before I let Robert take over everything. It made me feel strong, capable. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a grieving widow. I saw a woman about to take her life back. Jessica arrived promptly at 9, her expensive sedan purring in the driveway. She was all smiles, but her eyes were like little chips of ice. "Mom, you look so nice, trying to impress your boyfriend," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I'm trying to impress my new financial advisor, dear," I replied sweetly.
Arthur came out and I took his arm. He was in his professor uniform, a tweed jacket with leather elbow patches and a neatly pressed shirt. He looked harmless, academic, the perfect camouflage. The car ride to the city was tense. Jessica kept trying to talk to me about the retirement communities, pointing out their features, while completely ignoring Arthur, who was sitting in the back seat, calmly looking out the window. She was acting as if he was a piece of furniture I had inexplicably decided to bring along. I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. The offices of Davidson Financial Solutions were on the 30th floor of a gleaming glass skyscraper. It was one of those places designed to intimidate you, with a massive mahogany desk, floor-to-ceiling windows, and abstract art that probably cost a fortune. Mr. Davidson was exactly what I'd pictured. Slicked back hair, a suit that was too shiny, and a toothy smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. He shook my hand, his grip a little too firm, and gave Arthur a dismissive nod. "Mrs. Martin, a pleasure. Jessica has told me so much about you. I'm here to help you simplify things, to create a plan that will give you peace of mind for the future." We all sat down, Jessica and Davidson on one side of the giant desk, and me and Arthur on the other. It felt like a negotiation. Jessica started the conversation, her voice filled with that same phony concern she'd been using for months. "Mom has been through so much," she began, directing her words to Davidson, but looking at me. "And I've been worried that she's making some impulsive decisions. We just want to make sure Dad's legacy is protected. We want to set up a trust, something that I can help manage for her, to take the burden off her shoulders." Mr. Davidson nodded sympathetically. He slid a thick stack of documents across the desk towards me. "This is a standard durable power of attorney and the paperwork to establish a living trust with your daughter as the primary trustee. It's the smart thing to do. It protects your assets from outside interests." He glanced at Arthur. I picked up the top paper, pretending to read it. I let the silence stretch for a full minute. I could feel Jessica's impatience growing. She thought she was just moments away from victory. "This is all very impressive, Mr. Davidson," I said, placing the papers back on the desk. "But I think there might be a misunderstanding. I'm not actually looking to have Jessica manage my finances."
Jessica's smile froze on her face. "Mom, what are you talking about? We discussed this." "No, dear, you discussed this," I said gently. "I've actually already made my own arrangements. In fact, I've spent the last few weeks doing a deep dive into my financial history. It's been illuminating." I turned to Arthur. "Arthur, would you mind?" Arthur opened his worn leather briefcase. Jessica and Davison exchanged a look of smug amusement. They probably thought he was going to pull out some penny stock brochure or a pamphlet for a reverse mortgage. Instead, he pulled out a single, neatly bound folder. He didn't give it to me. He gave it to Mr. Davison. "Mr. Davison," I said, my voice clear and steady, "before we go any further, I should probably introduce my companion properly. This is not my boyfriend. This is Arthur Finch. He is a certified forensic accountant, and I retained his services 8 weeks ago to conduct a full audit of the Martin estate." The color drained from Jessica's face. Mr. Davison's professional smile vanished, replaced by a look of utter confusion. He opened the folder. The first page was a simple summary sheet Arthur had prepared. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "Preliminary findings of suspected embezzlement and corporate fraud totaling an estimated $4.7 million. Davison stared at it, his mouth slightly agape. He looked at Jessica, who was now as white as a sheet, and then back at me. He was a shark. But he was a shark who knew the smell of blood in the water, and he suddenly realized it wasn't mine. "What is this? What is this nonsense?" Jessica stammered, reaching for the folder, but Davison instinctively pulled it away from her. "I believe you'll find it's not nonsense at all," Arthur said, his voice quiet, but carrying the weight of absolute authority.
The next few pages detail the formation of two shell corporations, Triton Holdings and Silver Oak Ventures, established by your late husband. We have bank records showing a systematic transfer of funds from your mother's primary investment portfolio into these accounts for the past 15 years. We also have records of payments from those corporations for a condominium in Aspen, Colorado, and the lease on a Porsche 911, both registered in your name, Jessica. Jessica shot to her feet. This is insane. You have no right. This is slander. Mom, he's a con man. He's feeding you lies. I remained perfectly calm. Is he, Jessica? Because we also have your father's personal ledger. That was the word that broke her. Ledger. Her eyes widened in panic and horror. She knew exactly what I was talking about. Her carefully constructed world didn't just crack, it shattered into a million pieces right there in that sterile, overpriced office. She was trapped, and the door had just slammed shut. Jessica stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. The bravado, the confidence, the condescending control she had wielded for years, it all evaporated in an instant, leaving behind a raw, ugly panic. Ledger? What ledger? I don't know what you're talking about. You're confused, Mom. This man has gotten into your head. I didn't even look at her. I kept my eyes fixed on Mr. Davison, who was now flipping through the pages in the folder with a horrified fascination. His professional duty to his client, Jessica, was at war with his instinct for self-preservation, and it was clear which one was winning. Mr. Davison, I said, my voice cutting through the air like glass, perhaps you should turn to Exhibit D. That's a certified copy of a page from my late husband's personal ledger, dated June 12th, 4 years ago. You'll see an entry for a wire transfer of $80,000 from Triton Holdings to an account in the Cayman Islands. And right next to it, you'll see the notation, per J's instruction for condo closing. I assume the J stands for Jessica. Davison stared at the page. He swallowed hard. The jig was up, and he knew it. He was a party, however unwitting, to a consultation about defrauding a client. His own legal exposure was now flashing before his eyes. Jessica, he said, his voice a low growl, never taking his eyes off the paperwork. You told me your mother was incompetent. You told me you had a fiduciary responsibility that you needed help managing. She is! This is proof! He has fabricated all of this, Jessica shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Arthur. Arthur finally spoke. His tone as calm and patient, as if he were explaining a difficult historical event to a confused student. Miss Martin, every transaction is documented with bank routing numbers, dates, and transfer confirmation codes. The original ledger, written in your father's own hand, is in a secure location. We also took the liberty of cross-referencing these transfers with your personal tax returns for the last 10 years. You seem to have forgotten to declare several $million in income. The IRS tends to be quite interested in that sort of thing.
That was it. The final nail in the coffin. The mention of the IRS made Mr. Davison physically recoil from Jessica, pushing his chair back from the desk as if she were contagious. This meeting is over, he said, his voice flat. He stood up, refusing to look at either of us. Jessica, my firm cannot represent you. You need a criminal defense attorney. Immediately. He all but ran from his own office, leaving the three of us in that vast, silent room. Jessica sank back into her chair, all the fight gone out of her. She looked smaller, diminished. The power suit that had always seemed so formidable now just looked like an ill-fitting costume. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw not a shark, but a desperate child who had just been caught with her hand deep in the cookie jar. "Why?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Why are you doing this, Mom?" It was a question so steeped in a sense of entitlement that it almost made me laugh.
Why am I doing this? I repeated, my voice dangerously soft. You and your father, my husband of 42 years, conspired to steal my inheritance, my family's money. You treated me like a fool, like an inconvenience to be managed until you could put me away and claim the rest of your prize. You stood in my kitchen and lectured me on being a target for grifters, while you were the one who had been picking my pockets for 15 years. You ask me why? I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the city below. This was never just about the money, Jessica. It was about the truth. It was about the fact that you and your father bet on me being too stupid, too old, and too grief-stricken to ever figure it out. You were wrong. I turned back to face her. So here is what is going to happen. Arthur has drawn up a settlement agreement. You are going to sign it. Today. Arthur placed a new document on the desk in front of her. This is a legal confession and a repayment agreement. You will relinquish any and all claim to your mother's estate. You will sign the deeds to the Aspen condo and the title to the Porsche to a holding company controlled by your mother, effective immediately. Their value will be assessed and deducted from the amount you owe. For the remainder of the stolen funds, your wages will be garnished for the rest of your life until every single penny plus interest is repaid. She stared at the paper in disbelief. Garnish my wages? I'll be ruined. My career. Your career is the least of your worries, I cut in. Because if you do not sign this document right here, right now, then the second document Arthur has in his briefcase gets delivered. That is a full report of our findings, including certified copies of the ledger and all supporting bank statements. And it will be delivered to two places: the Internal Revenue Service's Criminal Investigation Division and the District Attorney's Office. You'll be facing federal charges for tax evasion and fraud. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Except in this case, he was a she. Tears were streaming down her face now, not tears of remorse, but tears of self-pity. Dad made me do it at first, she whimpered. He said it was our money, that you wouldn't have known what to do with it. Save it, I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. You were not a child, Jessica. You were a willing and active partner for over a decade. Now, you have a choice. Sign the paper and spend the rest of your life paying back what you stole, or refuse and spend the next 10 to 15 years in a federal prison. Choose. She looked from the agreement to me, her eyes pleading for a scrap of the maternal softness she had exploited for so long. She found none. My heart wasn't made of stone, but the part of it that had unconditionally loved and trusted my daughter had been burned to ash. What was left was a woman who was finally, after 42 years, standing up for herself. With a trembling hand, she picked up the pen Arthur offered her. Her signature was a spidery, broken thing, nothing like her usual confident scrawl. The moment she was done, Arthur took the papers, put them neatly in his briefcase, and snapped it shut. We're done here, I said, and without another look at her, I turned and walked out of the room with Arthur right beside me. The elevator ride down was silent. As we stepped out into the bright, busy lobby, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in months. The weight that had been pressing on my chest was gone. It wasn't just about getting the money back. It was about reclaiming my own life, my own intelligence, my own worth. I was not a confused old woman. I was a survivor. In the end, Jessica did as she was told. The properties were signed over, the wage garnishment began. Her high-flying life came crashing down to earth. I heard through the grapevine that she had to sell her big house in the suburbs and move into a small apartment. Her so-called friends, the ones that flocked to her wealth and status, vanished. I haven't spoken to her since that day, and I don't know if I ever will.
Some betrayals are too deep to mend.
And as for me, well, I'm not living in a brochure. I sold the big house, the one filled with all the ghosts and lies, and bought a beautiful little place by the sea, just like I'd always wanted. The recovered funds are sitting in an account managed by a team of advisors handpicked by Helen Vance, who has become a dear friend. Arthur and I are still in each other's lives. Our ruse as a couple blossomed into a real, genuine friendship, the best kind. We still go to the library and the garden center, but now, instead of whispering about wire fraud among the petunias, we talk about books and travel and the funny things our grandkids do. There is a quiet, comfortable joy in it. The other day, Arthur and I were having coffee on my new porch, watching the waves roll in. He looked at me and smiled. "You know," he said, "for a naive, vulnerable widow, you do a pretty good impression of a queen taking back her throne." I smiled back at him, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. "Heavens, Arthur," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. I was never the naive one. They just forgot who they were dealing with. And in that moment, looking out at the endless open ocean, I knew it was the absolute truth.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye.